Hi and big welcome to a best cards in Tivit with statistics, or a deck tech video, or a tutorial, or whatever you really wanna call it. So recently I made a video about Crom and Tymna and their statistics, and now we're moving forward to Tivit. Now I got some really good feedback and some requests from the comments, and basically Crick is the next one coming up after this video with Tivit. If you want to see anything specific regarding Crick, any specific cards, any specific win rates, or anything in general, leave a comment below and I will try to gather that statistics. And I will try my best to work through your wishes and requests. It takes some time to collect these, but I will do my best to try and showcase commander after commander. However, I have to say right now that I don't think we're in general gonna do Nigella. Nigella the Blade Blossom is already performing quite well, and I've already made some videos about Nigella in general. However, when it comes to Venota, here she is. She has a 7.5 win rate. So yeah, she needs some support. So I think Venota will be somewhere in the future, but Crick first. Someone also asked about the choice of win rate separation. The answer is actually quite simple. You see, in a 1v1 you have something like a 50% win rate. However, in a 4-pod multiplayer EDH game you have an average win rate of 25. And that is something easily showcased here as well. For example, Tivit, a 24.8 win rate, Crom Ludwig and Tymna 20, Nigella 33, and Rograk and Silas 25. So if we would go and look at something like 60% win rate and differ the group above that and below that, it's gonna be a little bit, it's gonna be a very small group with 40 and 60% win rate. But if you want me to showcase to you like anything specific regarding Tivit in various win rates, leave a comment below and I will try my best to answer that question in text. However, if this video gets like 2 days or more old, I might not answer your question because I might have removed all the data I've calculated as I've been starting to work on Crick. So throw away your questions regarding Tivit right now in the description below and I will try to answer that in text outside what I'm showcasing here in this video, because I also don't want this video to be too long. We have 133 decks collected, and as you can see, every single one of them plays time save, straight up and auto include. And I have to agree, you're not playing Tivit correctly if you're not including this card at all. Lotus Petals seem to be played by everyone as well, and Swords to Plowshares too, and Swansong gets played quite a lot. Draenei Magistrate, also somewhat of an auto include. Displacer Kitten, anyone that has been sitting in Value Town Tivit knows that this is great. Opposition Agent, very heavily played by everyone. But let's look at some difference. For example, Ad Nauseam isn't played that much by a few. However, Peer into the Abyss almost sees no play, and Doomsday 0 collections. Misdirection is played by very few. Ranger Captain sees a 73% inclusion rate among all the 133 decks. Sevin's Reclamation is also heavily played by pretty much everyone. Now, as Time Sieve was the big go-to combo, a lot of people are including tutors like Transmute Artifact and sometimes even Tesseret the Seeker. Even though Tesseret the Seeker actually don't see that much play or inclusion rate. But Muddle the Mixture, as it can be transmuted into Time Sieve, seems to get some inclusion, quite a lot actually. But let's look at some different win rate groups. Let's separate them. So we have Ian Flannery here with a 71% win rate in Mox Masters October 22, 7 wins and 2 draws. And then when you scroll down you see a lower win rate, etc. So what if we separated these two groups? I'm gonna separate them by 26% win rate, but once again, ask me in the comments below if you wanna see something like 60 or 50 on a few specific cards, and I can show you that data in text, but right immediately. But the reason I'm going for this win rate is because we have a lot of decks and the average win rate is lower than 26. So let's see what difference there are in card selections among the decks that get a higher win rate than the average. And once again, the average is 24.81% win rate for Tivit, so I think 26 plus is a good choice. So right above my head you have the higher win rate group with 63 decks, and on the other side you have the low win rate group with 118 decks. And if you look at something like Tester the Seeker, it seems to be played by both groups to an equal amount. Adnos is played by both groups quite equally. Archivist of Ogma is played by both groups heavily equally. Containment Priest is played by both groups equally. It kind of seems that like they're playing kind of similar decks in general so far. Or it is just that Containment Priest is a very good hate piece cards currently in the format. Counterbalance is played like 50-50, but it still has like a very similar win rate in both groups. Curse Totem, however, has a higher inclusion rate among the decks that are getting a higher win rate on average above 26. Imposter Mech is also a little bit more included among the decks with a higher win rate as well. And that follows up with Phyrexian Metamorph that also has a little bit more higher inclusion rate among the decks that get a higher win rate. But we can do this a little bit more interesting. Take a look at this. Now, in this statistics calculation, we are looking at decks that contain both Imposter Mech and Phyrexian Metamorph. Now they could just include one, but if they're included in one, they get into the red section. And here we can actually see that decks that include both Imposter Mech and Phyrexian Metamorph are a little bit more included in the higher win rate group. Let me explain that once more. So decks that contain both Imposter Mech and Phyrexian Metamorph are more frequent in the higher win rate group compared to the lower win rate group. This would suggest that maybe including both would be a good choice compared to just including one, maybe. I actually want to emphasize one thing very important here, that statistics here and there is a little bit tricky. Like, nothing I'm saying in this video is set in stone. I'm just showing you statistics and you make your own mind. And I'm also just sitting here and talking philosophically about it in general, the conclusions I draw, but you can draw different conclusions. Lofo is kind of played equally in both groups, but a little bit more in the higher win rate group. Once again, if you look at Lofo, just above him, it's 26% win rate. So the group on above my head is the ones with a win rate of 26 or higher. And on the lower win rate, it's on the 25 or lower. Orcish Bowmaster, equal inclusion rate in both groups. Time Twister has a little bit higher inclusion rate inside the decks with a higher win rate compared to the lower win rate group. However, when we look at Windfall, we see pretty much the same inclusion rate. Now, my conclusion from this is that this is basically a budget reason that Time Twister is kind of expensive. If we look at them together, they are more or less equally included in both groups actually. Sensei's Divining Top, I actually really agree with this one. I don't personally like Sensei's Divining Top. It is more included in the groups with a lower win rate percentage and less included in the groups with a higher win rate. This takes us to Counterbalance, if you remember. As you can see here, we have an very even, spread out inclusion rate of Counterbalance. But people did play the Sensei's Divining Top a little bit less. And I so absolutely agree with this statistics. This confirms my personal beliefs. I don't think that Counterbalance and Sensei's Divining Top is a good interaction stacks effect inside your deck in general. And here you have when both cards are inside the deck, they end up in the green percentage. When one or none of them are presented inside the deck, they end up in the red percentage group section. And as you can see here, the group with a higher win rate are including both Counterbalance and Sensei's Top less. The people or decks that have a lower win rate in general are including Counterbalance and Sensei's Top together more. The takeaway from this is that maybe you should just stick with counterbalance and skip Sensei's Divining Top, or skip counterbalance as well, maybe, up to you. Fairy Mastermind is not that heavily included among the decks with a high win rate. If we also look at, if you remember Archivist of Ogma, it is a pretty much even collection rate here for both inclusion rates in both groups. But look at this, here we have a huge difference in the groups. Decks, once again with a higher win rate just above my head, are including the both cards a lot less, while decks with a lower win rate in general are including both of these two cards together a lot more. In other words, the takeaway is something like, you don't need both value engines. I actually want to say something here. This might be an indicator towards the metagame and tournaments in general, what you should be focusing on. We're looking at two value engine cards here. And I think the message is that maybe you shouldn't have too many value engines in general. This is already an amazing value engine for you. This is also a great value engine. This is also something of a value engine. Like in the end, you're gonna get your commander into play with this and you're gonna crack your clues that Tivit creates with this. So yeah, it's a value engine. This is something of a value engine. And this is also something of a value engine. And maybe the verdict is, don't have too much. Maybe this value engine is a lot better. And also this value engine is just a lot better. Now on to the same concept of the ratio of the amount of value engines. You also have to be very picky about the selections of hate cards you include inside the deck. Grafdigger's Cage and Blind Obedience, when chosen together, sees a pretty even inclusion rate. And I guess these are just on to the meta what you should be focusing on. So if you're watching this video ahead, like in the future, this might change because the metagame could change and then maybe these cards aren't gonna be the ones to go for. However, if I'm gonna be honest, I think these are the cards we're gonna play for quite a while because Grafdigger's Cage shuts down Underworld Breach currently, and that's very important currently. Among 133 decks, all looked together, ignoring win rate, we can see this. Mnemonic Betrayal, 50-50. I think it should be more, but I think it's a player preference on this one. And I guess statistics kind of agree with me a tiny bit. The people here in the higher win rate group with 63 decks are playing Mnemonic Betrayal a little bit more compared to the lower win rate group. Now let's look at a 40% win rate difference. So the high group is going to be at 40% and upwards, and the other low win rate group is going to be at 39% win rate and lower. This means that we have if you look just above me, 30 decks in the high win rate group, and this is also one of the reasons why I don't think we should start climbing higher than 40%, because eventually you're gonna get a very little sample size in the higher win rate group, so to say, while in the low win rate group we have 103 decks. Now just looking at Orcish Bowmaster, it's heavily more played in a higher win rate group apparently. There's a huge difference in how LoFo is performing apparently. It sees more inclusion in the higher win rate group of 40%. If you look just above LoFo's card, you see win rate plus 40 there. Phyrexian Metamorphs inclusion rate stays the same. It was already pretty high inside the 25% win rate group, and it stays higher in the 40% win rate group difference. Same thing with Imposter Mech, and this is actually kind of huge. If you look at the lower section, it gets included a lot less compared to the higher win rate group of 40% or higher. The One Ring is played a lot more in decks with a higher win rate, as you can see here. Counterbalance, still pretty much the same, 50-50 in both groups. It was still a 50-50 in 25% win rate, and this seems to stay here in the 40% win rate as well. Mnemonic Betrayal has a higher inclusion rate, still at 40%. Time Twisters inclusion rate is still also higher, and even a little bit more higher in the high win rate group compared to the low win rate group. Windfall was pretty much a 50-50 when we were looking at 26%, but now it's starting to be included a little bit more. And Archivist of Ogma and Fairy Mastermind are pretty much the same thing in both groups, more or less. Sevin's Reclamation actually sees a tiny difference though. When we were looking at 25% win rate, it had a pretty much the same value on both groups, but now it's starting to be included a little bit less in the lower win rate group. So potentially a card that you should try to include. Very little change honestly, and statistic sample is very small, so hard to actually say, but here you go. The same thing with Tezzeret the Seeker, it's a very little difference. It sees more inclusion in a higher percent win rate group, looking at 40% difference, but it's a very small difference. This got a little bit interesting. So Wishclaw Talisman looked at 40% win rate is included by every deck among the 30 that have an win rate of 40%. And Grafdigger's Cage also started to be included a lot more. Now when it comes to statistics, there's a lot of different variables to take into consideration. Player skill and tournaments have different meta. Tournaments have different things that are good in depending on the tournament, because different people play different tournaments and different people bring different decks, which means the metagame inside tournaments will also differ. So there's a lot of potential error markers, but it should give you somewhat of an insight. If you didn't get to know what you wanted to know about Tivit, ask in the comments and I will try to look at my data and see if I have the answer. Just that I didn't just showcase the answer here, but if you're looking for something specific, ask away. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed the video and you got something out of it. I've been talking a lot about my personal opinions usually in my older videos, because we didn't really have statistics, but now we have some, we're starting to get some. So this kind of video is possible suddenly. The plan is indeed to continue with this, because I actually really believe that this is a very good approach, or we will try to improve on this approach. But I think this is a good approach to showcase decks and showcase good card selections. Take care, guys, and I see you when we're talking about Krik.